Matt Tamur, you might have played a decade or perhaps even more in Super Rugby, but tell me, was that the best weekend opening round of Super Rugby that we've seen?
In all honesty, I reckon it might be the best round, no matter what where in the season it lies. It was just phenomenal. I didn't catch the Force game live, but I was like, oh yeah, there's no way this will end. This won't end. With a thrilling finish. We've had too many of them this week, and good God, it delivered. It was amazing.
It was an incredible finish. You're not wrong. I wrote today in my Monday piece where you sum up some of the big kind of talking points out of the weekend, the 5 things we call it. Super Rugby is finally a product worth selling because Australia has arrived at the races at long last. Is it too early to say that? Like, I'm not in the story saying that an Australian team is going to win Super Rugby in 2025, but competitiveness has been something that Aussie sides have lacked over the last decade since your Brumbies made the semis in 2015 and the Tars made it as well in the semis in that same year. Is it too big a thing to say that Australia is now competitive after one round?
I was going to put a tweet out after the Force game and just be like, one round, Australian undefeated, and Kiwis have already lost 2 games, like just to poke the bear a little bit. But look, it's better than last year, and that's kind of your job, is to have those headlines and sell it a bit in a way. And I'm well behind. It's not unfounded. It's definitely not unfounded. I don't know when have we gone undefeated in years.
I don't think so. I'm pretty sure I heard Sean Maloney in commentary talk about the fact that it's the first time on an opening weekend that all Australian sides have won. Nonetheless, it's exactly what the competition needed to have an injection like this before the NRL and the AFL starts. A little bit of clean air. The broadcast deals aren't necessarily signed, sealed, delivered at this point in time. So here's a way to get a bit more momentum off the back of a promising November Test series up in the Northern Hemisphere. So much to look forward to on this pod off the back of a great opening weekend. We're going to catch up with one of the real rising coaches in Australian rugby, Zane Hilton, who's an assistant with the Queensland Reds. He was an assistant with Australia A last year. And, geez, there's all sorts of things happening in the coaching scene as we consider who might be the next Wallabies coach. So might that see a bit of a domino effect and other coaches come into the mix? We'll see, but it'll be good to have Zane join and preview a little bit about Moana Pacifica and their epic battle against the Western Force. So a lot to look forward to on this. Another edition of the Roar Rugby Podcast. I'm Christy Doran with Matt Tamur. We're not going to be talking all day because there's bigger and better things at large tonight. Maths, Monday night. You and I both know that, Matt, you're an avid watcher. So, look, I'm sure you're going to get pulled away at some point in time. But the Waratahs, Friday night, we're going to start there. And it started off with an absolute ding-dong battle across the ditch. And usually when we come to an Australian match afterwards, you're often left with a bit of a feeling of emptiness because the second game doesn't always live up to the Friday night clash in New Zealand. That wasn't the case in Sydney, was it? It was an absolute battle where Siframani scores a couple of tries towards the end, the young tight head prop, and wins the game in the 80th minute for the Tars against the Highlanders.
Yeah, and in terms of belief and everything, that's such a big win for those Tars players who last year would have, went down that many times on the bell in the last 5 minutes. So kind of gives them a bit of belief, to trust what Dan and the coaches are doing and that they are good enough. And yeah, often it doesn't have that fairy tale ending. Like you get quite excited about often the Highlanders as well. Actually, against the Waratahs are usually really good games, and then it fizzles. But to win that game was awesome, and the way they did, good use of their bench. Obviously, Joseph Suali looked strong as well, and it was just like I said. Just the winning piece, I think, is the most important. The fact that they won and they can build a bit of momentum off it and a bit of belief.
I was talking to my boss, Tony Harper, about tribalism earlier because I had a laugh with him earlier. Were you happy that Tottenham won? He's a big Arsenal fan, and he was like, "Oh, not really." And Liverpool won, so it doesn't really matter. And it kind of, we brought it back to Super Rugby. And this weekend, it was probably the first time in a long time where I think Australian supporters were happy just to see Australian teams win, as opposed to the tribal nature that has come in the past when you'd never really cheer for the Waratahs. How do you feel? Former player, didn't play for the Tars, obviously, not much association with New South Wales either. Like, are you up and about when a team like the Waratahs managed to get across the line and start the year with a W?
Yeah, when I was playing, and I guess our teams were at various stages were a bit more competitive that way. You'd just position it. You'd watch the Reds, and you'd be like, I hope Quade falls over, or I hope Rabs, falls over or something. You just watch it in position hate all the time, and you'd never cheer like the Waratahs. But I think being a bit removed, but then also just being the nature that the sport's been in lately, that if one of them benefits and the fact that they've got three of their coaches are ex-Brumbies, either coaches or players at some form. So it is weird cheering for that. But I think it's very much the case of we haven't had much to cheer for. And if we cheer for someone in blue, I remember last year was a super round when the Brumbies fans were cheering the Waratahs when they beat the Crusaders down in Melbourne or something. And I was like, that just goes to show we're a bit desperate at the moment.
Yeah, you're not wrong. But 37-36, and the game, I think it had 9 changes in total, 8 in the second half. It was extraordinary, the back and forth nature, and the defences of the Aussie sides in particular left a lot to be desired. The positional play, the counter, turnover ball, how sides adapted and so forth. What did you make of the Waratahs from a performance perspective? It was far from clinical, but they managed to get the win, and a couple of players did stand up.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, they got the win. That can't be understated. Honestly, the biggest thing I noticed this weekend in all the Aussie teams, let's say the Brumbies, because they've probably been known for it, is the attacking breakdown. I just felt like that was almost on a New Zealand type level, the aggression and the kind of violence at the breakdown. And I wouldn't be surprised that's been like an edict of Joe. Obviously Ireland known to be able to hold on to possession, and often we look at the shape and guys are running lines and all that, but it's very much set up by the breakdown. I thought that was probably the best thing across all Aussie games for me that I liked, and Waratahs definitely showed that. So I think McKellar would be pretty happy with that, because that is you can build off that. You can adjust your shape, you can get all running lines and all that stuff. But the game is still about violence.
Well, it sounds like there's a bit of violence in the background there with your bub at the moment, but you're not wrong. The breakdown totally it was an area of focus for Joe Schmidt. I'm sure Zane Hilton will talk about that in just a little bit as well. But you could see it, and that allowed for quick ball, and it allowed for the tries that the 3 Aussie sides managed to get as well. It's so much easier to play off fast ball for the backs, and we saw that when Joseph Kusuzwali became really short, centimetres from the line, really good pass and work from Jake Gordon right to left to hit Max Jorgensen to score there, and that was a crucial moment there at the time. But a couple of players that stood out to me. Angus Bell just continues to get the business done. It was great to see Tony Latupo play, I think, 58 minutes, and then to have Amani come on and then provide an injection of explosive energy was just as pleasing. Lane Gleeson's hands still kind of continue to be his major area of work to improve, but it was pleasing to see him be dangerous, to be violent in every aspect of the game. So pleasing to see there. What did you make of Suwali at fullback? It wasn't faultless, and the game plan did seem a little bit too kick-heavy for him, but they got the business done.
Yeah, I was a little bit nervous at the start of the game when I saw it being quite kick-heavy, and I was like, it's Waratahs is an interesting one. Like, if you win, people get behind you, but in Australia, you kind of got to do it in a certain fashion that inspires people. So, but it was well justified. It wasn't overdone. It was the bit that was probably a little bit frustrating was the execution of the kicks. I think that's often what some coaches will come down here. Is it Mike Catt? My Cats. Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll often get coaches from Northern Hemisphere come down here, and they'll have a good plan in terms of your kicking plan. But unfortunately, our kickers just aren't as dialed in as the English and that. So that left a little bit to be desired. But in saying that, I was super impressed by Belly. He was awesome. Max Jorgensen for me was someone who just didn't look like it was his second year or whatever. Like I just was like, oof, he's got a little bit of stature about him. He's got he just had a bit of a bit of groove. He was walking around with a little bit of swagger. And I don't know. I was really impressed by that.
I was going to ask you about Max Jorgensen because I saw him in pre-season when he came back in January, and he just looked physically in a stronger place than he has in the last couple of years. And it helps when you're not injured and you're coming back and you're racing the clock to get fit. But what can it do when you have a big player like a Sawali come in who takes all the focus, all the spotlight's been on him, and then it was even said in commentary, a 1-2 punch. We saw it almost, the 1-2 punch with Swali and then to Jorgensen next phase, and he did the business. Like, how can a player, from your perspective, when someone else comes in, like a Flower might have years ago for you guys, and what can that do for the players around them?
He starts worrying about the specifics of the game, and the temptation to think of how he's viewed in public is just diminished, I reckon. And in a good way, he can kind of just head down, bum up, focus on things that he needs to improve. And having Kellaway there will be great as well, because his voice and leadership and experience there will help someone like Max. Whereas if you look back in years gone past, he was almost the kind of senior role in terms of his ability. So now it just allows him to. But we've just got depth now. So I thought that was really good. And honestly, the other thing I wanted to point out was Taniela. There was this one time I think he got a turnover of someone. He dove at him at a tackle, like off his feet, belted him, got up, and then he was straight into him, like giving him an absolute serve. And I was like, you didn't see that from Taniela last year. Like you didn't see him, back in game, off the deck, up quick, hustling, and then diving at a guy, and just showed a little bit of it meant a bit more maybe. Than it has in recent times. And I think that's so exciting, because it doesn't matter what jersey he's wearing, you want him to do so well. He's such a potentially a world-class player in Australia, and it was really good for round one. That really stood out for me.
He's got a lot to play for, and not just a contract that he's trying to negotiate at the moment as well. So it's always interesting to see when players do seem to start to lift around that time. Look, we're going to jump around and we're going to talk a little bit about the Western Force with our next guest, because they came up against Moana Pacifica, beat them on the bell, of course, and the Queensland Reds are going to come up against Moana Pacifica this weekend in their opening fixture of Super Rugby. So joining us on the other side of this is Zane Hilton. It's a very warm welcome to our next guest, Zane Hilton. And I'll tell you what, we've just discovered that Matt Tamua has been coached by yet another podcast guest. I can't believe it. Tell us how the heck, Zane, you know Matt when you first met him.
Yeah, look, probably 20 years ago in the Queensland Regional Colleges here in community rugby in Queensland. I was working, running those, coaching them. I think it might have been Met East or Met West, one of those academies. Mate, he was a very young man then before he went off to private school.
He was so young that Matt didn't even know that the two of you had even met when we just discovered it. It was interesting watching your facial expression there, Matt.
Yeah, no, just a few head knocks, Christy. I'm not sure if you want to make fun of that too much, mate. It's quite a sensitive place. A bit embarrassing. My age, mate. My age showing as well.
Hey, Zane, awesome to have you on this time of year, because there's a lot going on. The Reds have just come back from a 2-week tour of Northern of Great Britain. You came up against Bristol and then against Ulster. Tell us a little bit about that trip before we turn our attention to Super Rugby.
Yeah, not a problem. Well, look, a great trip for us. Certainly for us to be able to go over and, play a Bristol side who, sitting top of the Prem, regardless of, the talk around who they played against us, to score 82 points there was great. The boys, obviously, you play well regardless. And then to come up against an Ulster side in Belfast that, they're incredibly gritty at home. Probably a little bit less talked about. We went in a fully opposed session against Gloucester on the Monday, up on the 4G as well in between. So, look, those kind of tours are, they're old school, right? Like it's things that you don't necessarily get to do anymore. You go away, you get to connect with your playing group, you get an opportunity to, as a staff before you go away into season, like the old South African trips, you get the opportunity for 3 weeks to get to know each other intimately, and that's only going to stand us in good stead leading into the season.
And traditionally, you see teams roll out, by no means their strongest team early days in first two trials. For you guys to actually get the big guns playing and, developing combinations overseas, all sorts of, what was the plan behind that? How did you see that obviously as a tactical thing to, give guys like Wilso and that a run?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Based on, look, we haven't played in nearly 8 months, as in we haven't played Super in 8 months. So off the back of, Super Rugby, we went into really extensive international series against Wales, Tonga, and then we played the 2 games in Japan. So we toured there and played before a lot of the boys went away with Australia A and or Wallaby. So to be able to build the cohesion of the playing group straight away, like at that point, before we left for tour, we'd only had the Wallaby guys in for 5 to 6 sessions before we left. So it was imperative that leading into round 1, we gave them the opportunity to, build cohesion, get those connection back with the playing group. And we wanted to play 2 capped games. We wanted to play 2 games that were capped. So we wanted to, really set the mark that, okay, we're going to play 2 sets of 23 and we're going to treat this as if they're proper games to really extend our season and give us the best opportunity to look at who can play and really what's the best group for us to pick leading into round 1.
Judging by the social media and Instagrams of some of the players and even the support staff, it looks like you managed to get out and about a little bit, a couple of Guinness along the way. Did Les Kiss have you guys on a fine leash, or did you get to see anything as well?
Oh, look, it's important to experience tour, right? Like you can't go to, to Belfast and not enjoy yourself. That's, certainly that's the great thing about rugby, and that's a great thing about touring, getting to, learning about shared experiences with the rest of the playing group, understanding who they are, getting, into a black cab tour and going around Belfast and learning about all the troubles and the conflicts was really, was really meaningful for us. It added a lot more weight, to the games, but also, that's the experiences. That's the difference we get in rugby. We get the opportunity to go and experience the world. And you can either do that by playing overseas or, opportunities like this. And certainly through our program at the Reds, we're trying to give people those experiences without having to go and play anywhere else.
Mm-hmm. Oh, you can certainly see it, and it's a great initiative and proactiveness from the Reds. So hats off to the club there. Tell me about the first weekend of Super Rugby, because obviously you guys didn't play. I don't know if a bye, you welcome that in the first week, but you at least got the opportunity to see what an Artie Sevilla, Moana Pacifica side can do. Did you gather as a team to watch any of that? Was it just the coaches, or do you do your own private homework before coming to on a Sunday or a Monday?
Yeah, look, we did it individually, but at the, probably the greatest thing was all the Australian teams winning. Like, how good's that again? It's great to see, right? Like, regardless of opposition or not, so impressive to see all those teams get across the line. And listening to you guys talk about the, how well they all did, it was awesome. Moana, what a great effort, what a gritty performance from them. I know a lot of those boys intricately, having coached Samoa and Tonga previously. So knowing those lads, like they've got some real quality, they've got some star power, but they've also got some depth. They've got Lotu Anisia, number 8, who they didn't end up picking in their match day 23, who, he's got power to, he's an incredible ball carrier at number 8, who can absolutely dominate. So, what we saw in Moana, we're probably expecting even bigger things leading into this weekend. They were unlucky towards the back end of the game, they would believe. Well done to the Western Force, and Ben Nelson did an incredible job to win the game. But at that point, I feel like, they'd played well and they certainly showed key areas of their game they improved. Set piece was a huge improvement for them. Scrum time, last year was, has been a massive step up for them. Poliasi Manu's done a great job there with that group at scrum time, and they've recruited really well to that. You've got Captain James Lay, who, he really is the heart and soul of that side. I know Artie is a fantastic player and world-class player, but, there's so many other players around him, that spine, that really they're going to be a huge challenge for us.
The defensive plan this weekend, like you see that their ability to beat guys one-on-one, or at least dominate contact and get an offload, it was quite obvious. How do you go about combating that in defense? Are you looking for low and high shot tackles? Are you looking to slow the ball down at the breakdown? What's the plan around that?
Yeah, good question. Obviously, Kyron Tabafalau, he was a standout for us at Tonga at the World Cup. He played incredibly well on the weekend. So, firstly, it's about possession from us, making sure we don't give them opportunities. We'll look after our own breakdown first and foremost. So, compact tight shapes. Our carry height's got to be, really important to not give away the turnover. But then defensively, we can talk about offloads all we like, but you've got to get a quality first up tackle initially. So how well we can dominate that collision initially is going to be important. How well our second man does to then, shift the ruck and or fight and tackle. And then, our ability to fix problems is going to be critical, because as we saw on the weekend, any scraps, any turnover ball, Kyron will hurt you. Willie Harvilly with his left foot will hurt you. Jackson Garden Bashop, who I had at the Rebels, he's a good footballer himself. He's played a lot of footy. They will hurt you. And to the point I made before, there's a lot of boys that have left out of that 22. Finn Anisi, Lotu's brother's an incredible at 13 on an edge. Andrew Tawala, they've got a lot of depth this year, which we know is going to be important throughout this year.
You clearly know the threats better than most, given your association and World Cups with the Pacific Island sides. I dare say you don't have to mention last year, but has it been brought up, the fact that there was a bit of red mist that guys like Tate McDermott saw, and I know that he gets a bit riled up when people bring it up to him as well. How much do you learn from something like last year when you slip up against sides like the Force and like the Moana Pacifica when you prepare for them a year later?
Yeah, I think you have to talk about the elephant in the room, really. I think it's important to acknowledge. If you just brush over it in your prep, it's probably not thorough. We've talked a lot about, the way we can, how well we can control the game. And, that's a huge part of it. If we don't control the game, both from territory and or possession, speed of ball, set piece, it's going to be a genuine contest for 80. So it's going to be really important for us to control that. But certainly we've spoken about it, we went to Whangarei last year and it hurt sitting in that change room post-game. It was a big miss from us as a group last year, and we've acknowledged that, as was the Force, as was the Drua away. 3 big ones for us that hurt us.
You're also coming back from a stint as the Australia A forwards coach, scrum coach there, when Australia A took on England Saxons, of course, and it was a great little trip up in the Northern Hemisphere last November. What's it like jumping between roles and different hats? Because you've been a head coach around the globe, including up in Japan, and an assistant coach at the Rebels, once again with the Reds. How have you found the juggling act there? And do you have a preference between being a head coach and an assistant? And do you think that there's actually much of a difference between the two roles?
No, I don't think there's an awful lot of difference. I think what they both do is allow you an appreciation for what's needed in each team and what's important. It's the really important point is to take the ego out of it and really understand what the team needs at that point in time. We talk a lot here around a team of coaches, and Les is really clear around that we at any given time can lead any area. If anything, that experience that I've certainly got, and certainly Brad and Jonathan Fisher, who I've got here as other assistants who assist with me with Les, we all are able to bring to the table our strengths, but also we're able to question. And, without having that experience of being a head coach elsewhere, being an assistant coach elsewhere, you probably don't have that. You probably stay in your silo, and that's certainly not what we are, and we don't promote that here. For me, I really enjoy coaching. So regardless of what it is, what the role is, what the remit is, it's about bringing a group of people together with a shared experience to ultimately make them better and achieve a goal. And I really enjoy the process of coaching and what that looks like. The connection piece, how we challenge, how you care, and then at the same time, technically, how you bring the game together. So for me, I'm happy coaching, Christy. I reckon that's I just love the art of coaching, and I really enjoy the process. And at the same time, I really enjoy the team environment. So for me, I feel like the experience I've got in both roles can aid certainly the head coach and or assistants either way.
One of the things I noticed when a coach went from assistant to head coach and maybe struggled initially was their ability to manage players when you're dealing with selection every week. I remember a coach saying to me, it's like breaking up with your girlfriend every weekend because you're dropping, 15 guys essentially. Whereas when you're assistant coach, you can often just, focus in on the detail of what you're trying to improve and that. How do you go about that? I've seen some coaches, head coaches, kind of delegate it and have other coaches to do it. So almost like you didn't know who shot you. But yeah, I don't know. I'm not 100% sure. Like, is it just a part of the job that you've just got to, like you said, take the ego out of it? It's not about me. It's about the team. We're putting that first. Are those difficult conversations harder as a head coach? What have you found works?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a bit of a combination of all of it. I feel there are always going to be hard conversations because people care. The way I would like to do it, and as a head coach, and I feel like the good head coaches I've worked with that I've seen do it, they own that space because selection's probably the most, those conversations are the most important thing you do every week. Around people having an understanding and clarity around where they stand. For us, in our environment, Les is exceptional in that space. When my experiences previously, I've certainly taken that on my shoulders because I feel like you want to make sure you've got clarity and the players have got clarity from you. The players might seek some feedback technically or tactically from their assistants, and certainly you drive them that way. But I feel like you have to be the one to take the conversation and to them. But ultimately, when those conversations are hard, ultimately it's a really good thing because it means that people care and it means that they're invested in what they're doing. If they didn't care, they'd probably just brush it off and walk off, and they're probably not as connected to it. The ones that are the lads that certainly take it to heart and it hurts, and it's really a good thing. And for us, certainly, if you look at our squad this year at the Reds, we're going to have a lot of those kind of conversations. And that's a good thing as long as people understand it's about the we and not the me. To steal one of Les's phrases, it's very much about understanding that we as a collective will get the job done and own your readiness, being ready for when it is your opportunity, and don't give it up. So, yeah, I think, it is, as a head coach, I think it is the most single important thing to do every week.
I was going to ask you about the selection headaches that the Reds are going to have, because if you look across all four remaining Australian Super Rugby sides, the depth is much, much stronger than in previous years. So have you seen that already play out in the training paddock? Are there any examples of players taking this personally, knowing that unless they front up, you're not going to get selected this weekend? So have you seen it? Has there been any fights? Has been more niggle than you might expect at this time of year?
No, well, you'd like to think that, there's a competitiveness across the group at all times. So there's not been any more or less this year because of the quality of player. Certainly what there has been, it has been just we've got a really, really great group around understanding how we want to play as the Queensland Reds. We've got a really good group in terms of challenging the norm. So the big thing certainly in our group is about you be you. We want you to express yourself. So this is a new Queensland Reds team this year, we might have there might be some similarities around the game model from previously, but the new people we've got in will express that differently, and we have had to give them the breath to be able to do that. That has created genuine competitiveness across the group, which means that at times it just means the quality of training. So you have to train well to be informed to play well. So for us, some of our trainings have been, incredibly willing, but at the same time, incredibly challenging for the players, because we can take them to a place that is game-like. Our trainings replicate game. It's the way we want to. It's the way we want to train if we want to play that way. So, for me, it's not been any fights. There's not been any of that sort of stuff. But at the same time, they've all challenged each other in a really open way and with the ability to express themselves.
It helps when you've got several Wallaby leaders in the Reds at the moment. Hey, what about, we were talking about Taniela Tupou earlier, and he's a guy that clearly spent a long time at the Queensland Reds, but there's also another tight head there that everyone's excited about in Massimo De Lutis. You would have worked closer with him than perhaps anyone in Australian rugby. Tell us what you think of him and his progression since he arrived at the franchise about 14, 15 months ago. And even in the last few days as well, a couple of young, exciting under-18s players that have been locked and loaded with the Reds, and Kingsley Ace and Will Ross, like that, really exciting young players coming through.
Yeah, look, Massimo De Lutis, probably tore my heart out a little bit last year, first day of preseason, tearing his quadricep, right? So, that put him back nearly 3 to 4 months. That then, he had to build his capacity and build his load towards the back end of Super. So he didn't get as many opportunities. So he's a little bit behind the 8 ball last year. What we've seen, you watch him go to the Australia A, in Australia A, played against the Saxons, and he was excellent. He was outstanding. He's taken that form into certainly the Japanese games that we had against Panasonic, as well as has taken that into our 2 trial games. Look, Massimo, he's by no means the finished product. And I think that's important for people to understand. It's important for us to be a little bit patient about it. Tight heads, you can get excited about tight heads. 21, the young Waratahs, young boy, he did an incredible job as well, coming off the bench. What I like about Mass is he has a willingness to learn his craft first and foremost, and then understands that off the back of him learning his craft and getting his core role right, other key elements of his game will come. He can carry low. He can be aggressive in the tackle, shift the point of contact. But at all times, he's got a real willingness to learn and asks a lot of questions. And for a young man, he's a great listener. And that's really, really important. He listens well. He listens from a lot of, there's no God complexes up here. Not everyone knows everything. The boys learn a lot from each other. Jeffrey Tumunga Allen's played a huge part in his development. Zane Nongor's played a huge part in his development. Sefar Gussie's played a huge part in his development. There really are a group that can extend each other. When I look at the 2 young boys, Kingsley and Will Ross, you can only watch the Queensland the Australian under-18s game last year. They were both standouts in that tournament. What we've seen since them coming into our academy, and we work really closely with our academy, they train a lot with us. They don't look out of place, when they train against our guys. Kingsley's an incredibly talented young man. He, again, will learn his craft, and that will take time. Will Ross will fit into his body over time. He'll grow into his body. His uncle played Scotland A. He was a good, strong brothers boy as well, here in Brisbane. So, he's got great pedigree. Again, though, they're still young men, but we're incredibly grateful to have them want to agree to play with us over the next 3 years, and really excited about what they'll bring to our squad over the next 3 years.
So, and if you look at last year, and most fans would look at it and say, yeah, the Reds seem like they're on a decent trajectory. What would you sum up, if you had to sum up last year and what you're going to do better this year? to kind of go that next step. What do you think that is? If it's 1 or 2 points, what's this Reds team gonna be known for in a way?
Yeah, we're really disappointed about our consistency last year. So our consistency of performance while we travel away, certainly games, I mentioned those 3 early on, Force, Whangarei against Moana, and certainly the Drua game for us hurt us. We have to play well when we travel away, and we have to be able to change gears. Hence, our squad depth will allow us to do that. It's going to take everyone in our squad to play well for us to be successful. So 1 point would certainly be consistency. 2 would be our ability to change gears based on who's in our squad and who's selected every week. And certainly 3, we're an attacking team. We want to hold possession. So we want to excite people with the way we play with the ball in hand. So for us, our ability to, work and build and hold possession pressure, that's going to be one of our keys. And we really enjoy playing with the footy. We've got, Harry Wilson, Sarah Urus, Fraser McWrights, Filippo Dangunus, these boys that want to play, Tate McDermott's, Fluky. There's a cohesion within this group that, we just want to let them express themselves. And to do that, maybe just get out of their way a little bit. Maybe we just, as coaches, we're just chatting about it the other day, maybe just take a step back for a bit and allow them to experience who they are and be who they want to be.
Yeah, that's fascinating, that last point. You look at that core, that spine of guys that have been there for a long time, and it's pretty obvious between the 7, the 8, 9. They've been there for years and years. So I think we'll see more and more of that throughout 2025. Hey, look, it promises to be a really exciting for the Reds. They're perhaps bigger and better things perhaps for Les Kiss, and who knows what that means for the ramifications for the wider Queensland coaching structure as Rugby Australia works out who their next Wallabies coach will be. But in the meantime, go well for 2025. Really great to have you here on the eve of the Reds kicking off their season against Moana Pacifica. So thanks for your time.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome to have Zane Hilton. He's a man that's rising through the ranks, and it's been noticed by Rugby Australia. I would expect him to continue his development. Perhaps it's the next Queensland Reds head coach. You never know. We spoke a bit about it, the Force there with Zane beforehand, who loved your line of questioning in particular there, Matt. I don't know if you've been complimented about your questions so much before, but
he didn't expect me he didn't expect me to put my sentences together, so we'll take it.
It's amazing what we'll do after you've had a few months off and the clarity of your question. It was perfect. But to tell us, what did you make of the Force? Did you see enough to suggest that they'll land a few more wins? Because it was an incredible amount of character that they showed there. No one thought that they were winning at the 75th minute when they were still trailing by a couple of tries. And then Dylan Peach, off the back of bursting onto an amazing ball from Nick White earlier in the second half, he then burst onto another one close to the line. This time found it way too easily, and that just injected some energy before Ben Donaldson came out with an absolute worldie.
Yeah, I think last year my criticism of the Force was probably that I felt they were just a bit pretty. Like they had really good shape, really good understanding, good theory and stuff, but that that breakdown or just those big moments, they struggled a little bit. And so I think the fact that when they were down by a little bit and Peach just goes, give me the ball, and he got past Artie as well on the line. Like it's not no mean feat. And then Donaldson just finding a way, and I think that's really important. You can look at the technical side of it and go, right foot, left foot, all this kind of stuff, but just the fact that they stood up in big moments was big. That scrum obviously is a little bit of a concern going forward. I felt for the Waratahs last year when they were just backing up and with so many guys. So I hope that they can figure something out in terms of getting loan players or getting people from overseas or something, because it would be really frustrating for a team like the Force who've clearly put a lot of work in their attacking structure and everything else to kind of just get hamstrung by that scrum.
Yeah, I think they're looking at a mid-20s Australian who's playing up in Harlequins at the moment, perhaps to bring him down. So that would help, because you're right. They were certainly off the back of losing Harry Johnson-Holmes and Harry Hooper, as we mentioned in last week's pod. That's a devastating blow. You can't afford to be losing your props so early in the season before a ball's even been kicked off. You've spoken about the breakdown on a couple of occasions. I think guys like Nick Champion de Crepney, I don't know how much you knew about him. I'm sure the Aussie public didn't know that much about him, but he's a 28-year-old who's just spent 3 or 4 years at Cast, and he comes back and he's a guy that's physically equipped to handle Super Rugby. And we saw what he did, Vincent did when he came off the bench, Will Harris as well. Like, that's how you build depth. You don't just throw 20-year-olds in there, guys that have, seasoned players, and that's what we saw.
Yeah, and in terms of what I was saying, them being a little bit pretty last year, you recruit for guys who are good around the tough stuff for guys who are battle hard, and it is really cool to see, teams bringing on guys like Will Harris or other teams bringing on some really seasoned players. And so, obviously the Rebels situation was awful and everything that went on there, but you'd be silly to say that we haven't benefited from it from a high performance point of view, which is good, because we often get blown away in the last 20, and people like to say, oh, it's because they're not fit enough, and it's not that, it's the fact that we just don't have the depth in that last 20 compared to other teams. So it's nice to see at this time of the year, when everyone's fit, that we're starting to bring some quality off our bench.
Yeah, well, Ashley Moley, he'll get better. First game of Super Rugby in a long time after missing last year. Brendan Panger, not even in the 23 on the weekend. So I wonder whether or not he'll have a bigger role to play, given his scrummaging prowess in the weeks to come. Your old teammate, Nick White, he's the guy that, he might be 34, 35. He's not looking like he's going away anytime soon.
He's not, and I know what you're getting at. Off air, I called him, he's just like a cockroach. You think you've killed him, but he just hangs on, even if a meteor hits. Like, he honestly was on the out when I was still playing, and he was much tougher than me because he hung around and I got out of there. But he is, it's remarkable. His leadership, his pass, such a, it is literally the most important thing for a halfback, is your voice and your pass. So he's doing a great job. His legs are probably a bit wider than a cockroach, to be fair. But yeah, looking forward to catching up with him this weekend in Melbourne, in Canberra.
It's a good segue, that, because the Brumbies, off the back of becoming the first Aussie side to win in Fiji against the Drua, will host the Force. You've got to tip your hat as well to Stephen Larkham. I think Clayton McMillan delivered a coaching masterclass for the Chiefs with what he did, the firepower that they brought off the bench against the Blues. At halftime, the Blues might have had a reasonable lead off the back of scoring on the stroke of halftime there, but when you can bring on a Tupou Vaya, Sammy Penny-Finau, Cortez Ratama, Narrower, the amazing outside back there that doesn't even get picked for the All Blacks at the moment, they just took the game to a new level in the wet. That was an extremely good performance. But Stephen Larkham had also another moment of brilliance, I think. The fact that they come away with a win in Fiji, yes, it wasn't exactly pretty. They probably should have been beaten, but the resilience, the performance of Luke Reimer was incredible. And now they bring in half a dozen Wallabies who are fit, that haven't just travelled to Fiji, and they can now see the Brumbies go up another level.
Yeah, it's seriously just an indication of how far he's come as a coach. Stephen, last year I was quite critical of DC taking his best team over there and then kind of draining his players. And you play Fiji away, or the Drua away. Sorry, you come away with a losing bonus point, and you say that's actually a good win. That's a good win for us, considering. And I remember when I was in England, that's how you often thought about certain games. You would go away to Saracens. You're like, if we get a bonus point, it's very let's be realistic, because they've got to plan for a longer year. And I think you're seeing Steve really just grow, and that's in his selection. And last year it was, I think he was taking off the 9 and 10 with 30 to go, and really quite tactical about it, and showing a lot of good selection. So I feel sorry for this force team kind of come in here, and then the Brumbies would just be stacked. And you don't really want to face the Brumbies at the start of the year. Traditionally, fast out the gate. I think if you look in the last few years, they'd be top 2 after 6 rounds, like very regularly. So they're often a force to be reckoned with. So it was amazing win. Yeah, you're right. It's right up there with the Chiefs up in Eden Park.
And Tom Hooper, I thought he took his game to a new level. Great leadership there. They needed a couple of players to stand up. He did. I think Ryan Lonergan had a good game. Hudson Crichton showed that he can do a job at outside centre. And might we see Lenny Katau a little bit more at 12 at times to allow Crichton to play there? They've got options up their sleeve because they're going to be bringing back some big-name players. There's still a couple of more injured, like the Rob Ballatini. So it is going to be a great game there on Saturday evening. The star power will be there. I'm sure you'll be watching on with a keen eye with your old mate, Nick White. Lastly, like the New Zealand derbies, like they were pretty special across the weekend. James O'Connor, Friday night, were you surprised that a guy like James, whose first match can come off and at the bench and do what he did? Because a couple of lovely balls, we spoke about the Nick White balls to Dylan Peach. Well, the ball from O'Connor to Will Jordan was pretty special too.
Yeah, you could see him really thriving with guys who read him well, which is quite ironic considering he's just gone over there. But like the Kiwis' ability to beat a guy one-on-one and sense a break coming or sense a line opening up is exceptional. And you could just see him, because he often will beat a guy one-on-one, but then, someone else might be a bit deep and then they get caught and you don't really get to see that. Whereas you see Will Jordan hitting flat, even Sevu Reece coming on the outside of him. He must be licking his lips being able to play with these guys because they're exceptional rugby players, but their rugby IQ, their knowledge, their sense of a break is second to none. It really is. And like I said, quite ironic considering he's just moved there. But you could see him starting to form some good combinations there, particularly on the short side.
Well, it's funny, I think there's plenty of good players in Queensland, but they're young guys, and then you can see what he can do with a David Hovey at inside centre and a Will Jordan, a Sevu Reece. Like, I think we're going to be talking, if James O'Connor can stay fit, I think we're going to be talking much more about him throughout the year. It'll evoke a really good discussion around picking players from right across Super Rugby, wherever it matters. And it might take an injury or two for James O'Connor to come back into the Wallabies reckoning. But for a guy of his experience, he played with some special players, and he was a special player in his own right. I wouldn't rule out another incredible turn and chapter in what has been an amazing story for James O'Connor this year.
Yeah, and you start looking at Artie. I know Moana are based in New Zealand, but they're not a New Zealand franchise, playing for the All Blacks. Hope Rab's playing. Crusaders potentially available for Australia. Like, you're starting to get a bit of that. We were kind of seeing it turn a little bit, and it would be great for the competition. It would be amazing if you could make it like open slather in a way, or a little bit like the NRL where the Kiwis just pick from here, and obviously you don't want that to diminish our stocks in a way, but I think fans will get behind whoever's wearing the jersey, and will get excited about Beauden Barrett coming in, to Canberra or something like that. But it'll be interesting.
I'm not sure Canberra would be on the top of the list of destinations.
Mate, Questacon, War Memorial. You're not getting that in Auckland, where he is now.
No. Yeah, well, look, the list.
2 before 10 coffee. You're not getting that. Yeah, good coffee down here. Good God.
Hey, before we finish up, what are you most looking forward to next weekend? Round 2, there's a couple of good games. It probably centres on another New Zealand derby, though.
Yeah, first game, I think. Is that the one you're talking about? Crusaders Chiefs, potentially?
I think so. I'll bring it up. It's Crusaders Chiefs Waikato at 5 past 5. You're right.
Yeah, Crusaders first up will, I think probably gets everyone a little bit nervous. The fact that they're winning again, but yeah, they look good. They look really good. They've got too much firepower not to be. So it'll be interesting where they go. Honestly, I'm really looking forward to seeing all Aussie teams, except Tars, at the moment because they got the bye. All Aussie teams back it up. And yeah, just kind of see where we're at and slowly get some more and more information about, what is it, were we getting excited too early, or is there genuinely some quality across the board in all teams?
Well, we probably won't know by the end of round 2, given there's an Aussie derby, the Waratahs having a bye and the Reds taking on Moana Pacifica, but we will see soon enough. I think that's a wrap on another edition of the Roar Rugby Podcast. You've got to turn maths on and have a bit of family time. I'll let you do that. Until then, thanks for joining, and a big shout out to Zane Hilton as well for jumping on today. Until next week, that's a wrap.